Today is the 19th of February, 2013.
Right.
We're doing a home interview in Valley Falls, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm with the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
Abott Wiley, Lansing Wiley,
Mm-hmm.
and birthplace is Pittstown, town of Pittstown. September 18th, 1916.
Wow. Did you attend school in Pittstown?
I attended a district school,
Mm-hmm.
which had about 13 or 14 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, I went to Lansingburg High School, which involved a trip from 4 miles to the railroad and then 13 miles on the railroad to high school.
Okay. And what year did you graduate from high school?
1934. I graduated in 1934.
All right. Now, once you graduated from high school, did you go on to college?
No, I worked on a farm. We lived on a farm, a dairy farm.
Mm-hmm.
And from 17, getting out of high school to 24, I was on the farm. And I intended to be a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1940, Congress passed the draft. And we had just built double the side of the milking herd and a new cow barn.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided that I wanted to get the year training over with.
Mm-hmm.
So on April 3rd, 1941, I joined up. And the year lasted to February 6, 1946.
Okay. You enlisted in the Army?
I enlisted in the Army, yeah.
And why did you pick the Army?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't, rather than what?
Well, as opposed to like the Navy or the Marines?
Well, there wasn't many Marines then, and the Army had always done rifle shooting, hunting,
Mm-hmm.
and trapping and all that stuff. So I think naturally for the Army.
Okay. Did you have any relatives that fought in World War I?
No, I had cousins
Uh-huh.
that was in World War I, but my brother was he had joined the Air Force
Mm-hmm.
while I was still in basic training.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, where did you go for your basic training?
Camp Wheeler, Georgia. They were just building the camp,
Mm-hmm.
and our company, half Tennessee and half New Yorkers, were the first company there.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that because a whole bunch of us got sick, and we had to go to the hospital, and the hospital was just being built, and we were in a big room
Mm-hmm.
on cots.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really sick, but I said to one of the orderlies, I said, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, boy, I don't think I can make it till morning. I said, is there a doctor here? He said, no. Is there a nurse here? No. He said, I'm the only one. And he'd probably been in the Army a couple of weeks too,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a medic. So I shouldn't tell, but then he said, I'll tell you, I said, I'm in tough shape, but he said, I tell you, I shouldn't do this, but when I left home, my grandmother gave me a bottle of medicine, and she was in the mountains of Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and she said if they told me if I ever got sick, to take couple teaspoons of this. And so he said I shouldn't do this, but I went and got the medicine.
Uh-huh.
And he said, he gave me a couple teaspoons, and I don't know what it was, but I went to sleep. And didn't wake up till the next morning. So that ended that deal. The next day I went home.
Now, how did you get along with those boys from Tennessee?
Well, we got along good. But I remember one Sunday, one of the guys said, he said, you really guys aren't bad guys. The only trouble is you're all goddamn Yankees.
Now, was that your first time away from home for a long
That's
period?
about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So then the training was normal, like
Mm-hmm.
all the rifle training, you know.
Yeah.
I always remember they talk about women getting in combat today, but when we were at bayonet training, if you stick a guy with a bayonet to get that out, you turn it 90 degrees and pull it out.
Hmm.
Did you know that?
I didn't know.
What?
I didn't know that, no.
Well, that's the way you do it.
Okay. Now, were you training with the old World War I Springfields back then?
The back with the Springfield, yep.
Okay.
We shot with the Springfield, and of course we had a lot of map reading and health, schools on health, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of night marching and compass reading and so forth.
Now, once you finished your basic training, did they send you to an advanced infantry school?
No, they sent me to the 113th Infantry in New Jersey.
Okay. Whereabouts in New Jersey? Was it Fort Dix?
Well, it was Fort Dix, yes.
Okay.
And the commander was Colonel Schwarzkopf, the father of General
Oh, okay.
Schwarzkopf
All right.
of the 1991 war. And while there, they made me a radio operator, which I didn't know much about radios, but anyway, I was.
Mm-hmm.
Then after there, we went to Carolinas for maneuvers. And while we were there for quite a while, I think that was in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the way home from the maneuvers, we stopped in, I think, West Virginia overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And being on the radio, I got a message that the Japs had bombed Pearl
Oh,
Harbor.
okay.
And of course, you write out a notice and give it to the commanding officer. But when we were eating, I couldn't keep it to myself. So the guys got mad for me starting that rumor. But then we were called out after eating chow on the side of the hill, and a major explained to us what had happened, that the Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys probably wouldn't be going home, which we didn't. Then we went fast back up to New Jersey and walking guard on the Jersey coast.
Mm-hmm.
And they set us out. And this is a funny thing about walking guard. See, and in January, Hitler's submarines were working off the coast.
Oh.
And we were walking guards without any guns, and I wanted to bring my deer rifle from home so we'd have a gun. That's how well off we were. But I remember walking guard one night and seeing 5 fires out to sea, and the Coast Guard tried to get their boats in the 6 and 7 foot surf to go out and pick up what I presume would be people.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, gee, if I keep telling all this, you'll never be able to go home.
Well, I've got plenty of time, so.
What?
I said I have plenty of time.
Well, then this was a headquarters battery we were in of the 113th Infantry. And my job was just the radio, which they were lousy radios compared to today's. But let's see, I was a corporal T5, a technician, you know, a corporal technician. Then our first sergeant was Sergeant Monahan, and he'd been in the Army 6 years, a short Irishman with black hair, and excuse me, and he wanted me to be a corporal. So anyway, to be a corporal, I had to take a test, oral test, no, a written test. Then I had to go before a board of officers, and I took the test, the written test, and then I had to go before 4 officers, and there was a captain and the rest were field officers. And so they were, because they were all from the city, they found out I was from the farm. And they were kidding me about making hay and milking cows and that kind of stuff. So finally they said, "What do you think of the outfit?" And I said, "Do you want me to really tell you what I think of the outfit?" And they were all for that. Well, I said, "In the first thing, we're walking guard, and it's so cold, we don't have any clothes, and I wear everything that's issued to me and half of what some guy ain't on guard." Then I said, "The eats are left over from World War I, and they're all so tinny." And I said another thing, I got an engineer in our company, and if we're going to win the war, he should be in engineers. And then I said, "There's a telephone man, and he should be in the Signal Corps." So then I shouldn't have said this because these guys were a little out of shape. They were field officers, see. And I said, "We're really not in shape for an infantry outfit. We should be doing more calisthenics and walking." So I was dismissed, really dismissed. So when I went back for Sergeant Monahan, said, "How'd you make out?" Well, I said the written test wasn't too bad. But I said, then they asked me what I thought of the outfit. He said, "What'd you tell him?" And when I finished, I thought he was going to have a stroke. He sat right down in the chair, and for 2 minutes he couldn't stop laughing. He said, "Of all my life, that's the funniest thing I ever heard. You tell him what you thought of the outfit." So he said, "You know what you have done." And he said, "You have made, you know what it is, the shit list, this outfit." And he said, "I got to get you out of here." I said, "Well, get me in the Marines." "No, I ain't going to get you in the Marines." He said, "No." He said, "I'm going to put you in for officer school." I said, "I don't want to be an officer." He said, "You let me handle it." Well, I had learned enough from being a private in the Army that when a captain or lieutenant told you to do something, you could always get out of it by saying you didn't understand it. But if the first sergeant told you to do something, you better do it, because he could make life so miserable for you the next 2 days you wish you'd never been born. So that went along. And a couple of days later, somebody said, "The first sergeant wants to see you." And I went up and he said, "You got some papers here for you to sign." He said, "You better read them over." And it was for me to go to school, to Fort Knox for armored school. And so I thought, Okay, so I signed the papers. And that went along for 2 or 3 days. Then he wanted to see me again. He said, now this afternoon, you got to be down to 113th headquarters. And he said, you got to meet Colonel Schwarzkopf. And he said, for gosh sake, he said, get the mud off your shoes. And if you have a clean pair of pants, put them on and be shaved and brush up on your yes sirs and no sirs. So at 2 o'clock I was down at headquarters. So there was a corporal there at the door and he said, what do you want? And I said, I was told to report here. So he sticks his head in the door and he said, go on in. So I went in and standing behind the desk was this rather medium-sized man, and he had a mustache under his nose, just like Adolf Hitler had. And he said, I reported to him, reporting to, as ordered, sir. And he said, sit down. So I sat down, and he stood up, and he said, the other day, he said, you took a test for corporal. And he said, you took a written test. And I found out the written test was what he used to give the New Jersey State Police when the state police were trying to get in, you know, the new people. So he said, you passed the written test. I remember this. He said, very, very, very high. But he said on the oral test, before the officers, you didn't do so good. He said, tell me about it. So I told him exactly what happened, and he probably knew it. But then he said, well, you're dismissed, so that was it. So I was glad to get rid of that. But then about 3 days later, first sergeant wanted to see me again. He said, here. He said, I got a pass for you. You can go home for 3 days, and when you come back, you're going to Fort Knox for officer school. So I got home, and I took a day to get home, and then I was home a day and then went back. And when I reported back, he said, everything has changed. He said, the Army says you're too high in math. He said, you're going to Fort Sill. I got your train tickets here. I got your meal tickets here. You pack your stuff, and we'll take you up to the railroad, and you'll be off. And that was the last I was on the East Coast. So I had to, I don't know how long on the train, but probably it took a day or more to get to Fort Sill, to officer school. And there I remember when they got there at the class, the first class, the officer said, we got a year's work to do in 3 months. He said, the day starts at 5 and it ends at 11. And he said, you never walk. If you're going anywhere, you run. And that was it. So 3 months later, I got out of there.
As a second lieutenant?
Yeah, as a second lieutenant. Then I came home, and I had orders to go to Oregon. They were activating the 91st Infantry Division, and all new guys were going in there, second lieutenants. And you had jobs for captains and everything else. But I went there, and this is a funny thing. They took me out of the infantry, put me in the artillery for my math, but when I got to the artillery, because I come from the infantry, they put me in service battery, which I was upset about. But later, in combat, I realized that I had the best deal. I was on the go by my own self and not staying in one place, see.
Okay. So you were assigned to the 91st Infantry Division.
Right.
When did they send you overseas?
Oh, it must have been in the first part of 44. We, I know the 346th Battalion and the 347th, we had all the guns and equipment on one train, and it came straight through, never stopped
Mm-hmm.
to Newport News. Then there, a couple days later, they brought the troops in, and we had to check all our equipment on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 21 days, we landed in Iran.
Okay. So did the whole division go over by ship together?
Yeah,
And did you go in a convoy or
Uh,
did you go in a convoy with other
yeah,
ships?
yeah, a lot of ships. In fact, we could go up, the captain would let us go up in the lookout, and as far as you could see, to the front and the right and the left and the rear, as far as you could see, there were ships. And I think they went down to the West Indies and across to Africa
Mm-hmm.
and up the coast of Africa through the Strait of Gibraltar to Iran, Africa. And what we were supposed to do there was train for landing operations. And of course the rumor was we were going to land in southern France. But we were there, I don't know, a month or so. Iran had been taken between the British and the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And that was there. One little incident happened there. See, the French, our army had to capture Iran from the French. And I know when they were unloading our guns there, they dropped one so about so the colonel was looking overboard and he yelled about it. Well, they dropped the next one so it bounced a little bit more. And I remember the colonel grabbed a carbine and he shot 4 or 5 times over their head. And that ended the dropping of the carbines.
Uh-huh.
So from there, we were landing, the Navy took us across in the Mediterranean to Italy. We thought we were going to southern France
Mm-hmm.
for the others, but in the middle of the Mediterranean, they opened the orders and we were to go to Italy. So one little incident that I remember, the captain of the boat, Navy boat, said the officers will eat in the officers' mess. I was a captain. And he said, when you do, you wear ties. I'll never forget that. And our Colonel Lynn said to him, just where in hell do you think we got ties? He said, everything we got is on our back. And I remember climbing down that big rope ladder
Mm-hmm.
that was 100 feet wide, all full of men climbing down to the landing craft, which was at Naples, near Naples. The British Army had taken Naples. And so we got to the landing craft, and I always thought the guy was afraid of getting mud on his boat because he left us out in about 4 feet of water. So when we got to shore, we were all pretty wet. But then nothing really happened till we got north of Rome. And as I said, the British Eighth had taken Rome. And north of Rome, I remember we got news that the landing in June the 6th from English to northern France had started. So then we were on the Italian campaign. I don't know how much time elapsed there, but we were to take over for another division that had been in the line.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you this is a funny thing. Officers a new outfit going in the line, the custom was for the officers go up for a day with the other guys, with the old outfit that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I think it was the 34th Division. We were replacing. And so an officer from the 34th took us out. And we're driving through the countryside and no noise, no nothing. And finally he stops. Now this is as far as I'm going, he said. But that ridge over there was about half a mile away. He said, that's German territory. If I were you, I would sit around here and listen and see what was going on. No noise, no battle noise, no nothing. And it's different than on TV. When you turn on TV, a war thing, they got guns and rockets and bombs bursting and everything else. No sound, no nothing. So I was with another captain, Captain Ben, from Headquarters Battery. So we sit there probably for an hour and nothing there, but between us and that hill, that ridge, there was a house. So we thought we would go over to the house. So we got over to the house and were there half an hour, no noise, no nothing. So this house was dug into the side of a hill and it slanted out. So I thought I would go out in the back of the house and climb up on the roof and see where it was going. And there was a red chimney there, I remembered that. And so I got snuck up, scrambled up the house on my belly and got up next to the chimney and my ears up against the chimney, looking around, still no noise, no nothing. And all at once, near me, my ear on the chimney, there was a little ping, little bits of mortar hitting my cheek. Then I heard a sound. Boy, I didn't need an education to tell me that that was a bullet. So I scrambled back down the roof and went inside and told Ben what happened. Well, we stayed there for a while. And then there was a little window in this house, had little panes about 4 or 5 inches square. So after a while, I thought I had to see out of them, so I got to the right side of the window and looked out. That went on for 4 or 5 minutes. And all at once, the pane I'm looking out of, the next one over here disappeared. So I got out of there. So Captain Ben said, did you ever play baseball? I said, yes, I played a lot of baseball. He said, if I were you, I would watch the third stroke.
So that was the first time you were under fire?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had, so anyway, we didn't do much else, but that afternoon we wandered around a little. We ran onto a squad of Japanese out of Hawaii, the 442nd Regiment.
Oh, okay.
And they had been on patrol, I think, that night. And they were all sleeping in a ditch. They had their blankets over them. They had one guard, and he's sitting on a chest of the big dead German, eating his K rations. And the German had been hit with a shell. And I thought to myself, boy, he's pretty hungry to eat and sit there eating that K ration. But the little Jap said to me, he said, boy, this guy really got hit, didn't he? But we went on back. Afterwards, we went on back to where we were, our Jeep. And that night, we were going to sleep in a ditch by the Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty near to sleep, and I look up and silhouetted against the sky as somebody says something. And I look up, and I can see he's got an M1 rifle. So I think that's okay. He said, look at guys. He said, you better get out of here. He said, intelligence tells us the Germans are supposed to attack here today. And he said, we got it covered with artillery and mortar fire. And he said, we're pulling out and leaving it to them. So that was it. But then we pulled back, and then the next day we went to our outfits.
Mm-hmm.
back to our outfits.
Okay.
That should be enough.
So what happened next? Where did you stay in that area?
No, I don't know. The British had a line, and they had to. It takes a little while to prepare for a battle. You got to get a lot of ammunition and that stuff up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And see, the war in Italy was mainly artillery and the sniper fire, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of artillery.
Now, you weren't fighting the Italians at all, just the Germans?
No, the Italians had surrendered.
Okay.
They surrendered. And
Now, you mentioned that an incident where one of your men shot and killed a German colonel
oh, that was later.
later on?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's see.
See, maybe I can tell that. It won't make any difference where it is on the thing. But this happened at the end of the thing. See, actually, you know, there was a lot, the British Eighth Army had a lot of different nationalities.
Mm-hmm.
There was Canadians, Gurkhas, Sikhs. The Gurkhas were from northern India. The Sikhs were big, tall guys with beards,
Mm-hmm.
and they were Hindus. The Gurkhas, their religion was nothing would happen to them till the time came. And I remember one in a little instance, I was going across this bridge and the Germans were shelling it. So we stopped, wait till they get through. But the Gurkhas came through and walked right through it. They didn't believe anything would happen to them because everything was predetermined.
Oh.
But the Sikhs had their own goats with them, live goats, and killed them. And they didn't have utensils. They just had a big bowl of stuff where everything was cooked.
Mm-hmm.
And you used your fingers. And they asked me to have something to eat one night. You just reach in the bowl and pick something out. And that did away with all the extra utilities.
Let's see. You mentioned an incident with a German Messerschmitt. You were
Well,
strafed?
see, maybe I should tell you about Sergeant Riley the Messerschmitt, yeah.
Yep.
One day, Sergeant Riley was one of my better men. One time I remember asking him to do some detail. And he said, I said, take your friend Ray-Ban and do this. Oh, he said, I can't use Ray-Ban. He says he's reading the Bible. I said, reading the Bible? He said, yes. He said, last night, while he was sleeping, a shell hit terrible close to him. So ever since daylight, he's been reading the Bible. He says, I can't use him. I said, okay, get somebody else. I'm glad somebody's reading the Bible. Then one day, I'm talking to Sergeant Riley out along the road, and he's got his back up the road. About a half a mile up the road, around a corner, bend in the road, comes a German fighter. And the front of it, he's got the tracers lined on the road, so that they had 2 machine guns in each wing, and they're lined on the road, so there's just a sheet of flame coming down the road. So I jumped in the ditch, and Riley jumped on top of me. So it wasn't only seconds when bullets were hitting around us and digging up the dirt, you know, little bunches of dirt digging up. Now this is a funny thing about the mind.
Mm-hmm.
While I laid in the ditch, my mind returned to when I was 9 or 10 years old, and we had a terrible hailstorm at home. And the wind was blowing about the same angle these bullets were coming. And every time a hailstone would hit the ground, it would splash water. The only difference was these bullets were splashing dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the funny thing about the mind. But anyway, after probably 40 seconds, see, I said to Riley, get off of me, so he stood up. Now, knowing that he had his back to the plane, he couldn't see it. And knowing it was coming the speed of sound, he probably couldn't hear it. I said, what the hell did you jump in there for? He said, I jumped because you jumped. That's a trained soldier.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also mentioned another fellow that was late for pay, and you sent somebody to get him, and then when he left his tent, it took a direct hit?
Yeah. Well, this is quite I don't know how much you want me to talk.
Oh, well, you can, as long as you feel up to it. You know, we can go for a couple hours if you like.
You know, this guy, I'll tell you the whole story.
Okay.
We're in this area, my battery is in about 2 or 3 acres, and between Florence and Bologna, it's all mountains. And there was one road, Route 65, went through there, was a good road. And going up it was 3 infantry divisions, the 85th, the 88th, and the 91st. But when we moved into this area, the firing batteries were off to the right. In front of us was a big hill, and to the left of the hill was what used to be a path for cattle, probably, but the infantry used it for their jeeps.
Mm-hmm.
Then off to the left, there was a river, it went down to a river, and across the river on the other side was other divisions. When we moved in there, I got a message at 10 o'clock at night that nobody's on your left. Route 65 was behind us. And so I got up and looked out, and boy, it was terrible dark. You couldn't see nothing. So I thought, I don't think the Germans can see anything more than I can. So I knew my sentries would be holed up in a cab of a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like people running around at night. That shouldn't be there. So I thought we would wait till morning, so I went to sleep till morning. But anyway, everything went along. But one thing I did, after being there a couple of days, I looked at some of the foxholes, and they had snow and mud in them. So I give the first sergeant orders that I would be around before dark, and every man should have a full foxhole. And that was one of the best orders I ever give.
Mm-hmm.
That night, I had a tent probably 6 feet wide and 8 feet long, and there was 2 other lieutenants, and I were playing some kind of foolish game with matches. We had a candle, you know, we were doing to pass the time, and we had about probably 6, 7 months of pretty good artillery fire, and so we were pretty well tuned to artillery. But while we were playing there, we heard this gun sound, a heavy gun, and then we heard the shell. And I never forget, all 3 of us froze because there wasn't no use of running. And it seemed like it almost skidded against the tent, went into the ground, and with a dud. And I always said, if I ever ran on to the slave laborer that made that fuse, I would kiss his rear end St. Peter's Square. But boy, then they started shelling us. And I went on for 6 minutes. Boy, that was heavy stuff. So after a little while, there was a pause. So then I thought, I better see what's happened. But then they started shelling in another 6 or 7 minutes. So after that, there was a stop for a minute. I thought I better get out of this hole. You're damn cowards. You got to get out and see if the men are hurt. So I started out along the right side of my area, and I passed a couple that were in foxholes. And you know from being in Vietnam, when you're being shot with a in a foxhole, you only take up about 6 inches of the bottom. So as I went on, a shell landed in front of me. Now this is big stuff. And dirt went all over me. Shrapnel went by my ear. And I really don't know what happened. Then the next thing I know is there's a light, kind of light shining in my eye. And I come to after a while. And it seems like dawn is breaking in the east. And I finally figured out that what it was. And I was in a hole with another man. The guy I was in a hole with was a Montana sheep herder from out of Montana. And he was snoring. And I couldn't believe that. How could he be snoring with all the shelling going on? And finally, I came to a little bit more, and I went out and across the battery area, and I ran into one of my sergeants, and he's trying to tell me something, and his lips moved, I remember, no noise. And so I went on, I ran into more people, and they had the same problem, trying to tell me something, but no noise. So I thought, boy, these guys are really shook up. Finally, I found a guy that could talk, and he said, one of the sergeants had dragged me back in a hole with the other guy, must have been knocked out. But anyway, he said, they shelled us 2 more of them 6 or 7 times. And he said only one guy was wounded, and we got him to the hospital. So I thought, boy, somebody knew we were behind that hill. So finally I got my Jeep driver and I went up and told Colonel Lynn, I got to move. So he said, find a place, other place if you can. So I looked around and I couldn't find a better place. So I sent a truck back to pick up sandbags. I told the guys we're going to stay here, but we're going to sandbag ourselves in. So after a while, probably 10 o'clock, they came back with sandbags. So we started sandbagging where they slept. And some of them had dug into the hill, you know. So I said, I want 3 feet of sandbags around the sleeping tent, you know. So I helped them, got right in and helped them. And I probably didn't let anybody sit around because I thought work would be the thing to do. And I remember it was afternoon, and this Corporal Slater, he's holding a sandbag, and I'm got the shovel and pouring into it. He looks up at me and he says, now, he said, we know why you've been such a son of a bitch all morning. He said, we feel better already. So after that, we did pretty well. For a day or so later, who comes through the area down the corner of this hill is an infantry jeep, and they got a German officer as a prisoner. And I can't believe my eyes. Here's a German officer in full dress with a hat on, full uniform, everything. A monocle in his right eye. And his boots are just as black and just polished as could be. I looked at my boots, they were mud and snow. I probably hadn't my trousers off for 3 weeks. But anyway, I thought I must be in the wrong army because he was really dressed. But anyway, they went on with him. But a day or so later, a platoon of the infantry had been brought back to go get, they'd been on the front, to go get some new clothes. And quartermaster had an exchange back there where they get a gallon of water or so for a shower, and you change your clothes with some other outfit that had had it done before. But anyway, when they came back through my area, the platoon was all jumbled up. And I ran out and I said to the lieutenant, spread your men out, because when they go round that corner, they may get a shell from a German artillery. And he came back with the dumbest answer I ever heard. He said, we're not afraid. 20 minutes later, the medics brought 4 guys out of there on litters. Whether they were killed or just wounded, I never knew. But that lieutenant was really nuts not to spread them guys out. And you know, you should never take a chance if you're an officer. If you're any little bit of information, use it. And I had told him what might happen. But there was 4 guys gone.
Now, how often were you able to get a shower or fresh clothes or even a hot meal?
Well, this is a funny thing. 2/3 of the way through the Italian campaign, our battalion had fired 1 million shells. And I know the Germans had fired half that many back at us. So it was quite often. See, on observation, they would. Now, you asked me about this guy. After this, the Army must have been the 1st of December. They set up the payroll, and that was real silly because there was nothing to buy. You know, nobody had nothing to sell. And we would be Italian lira, they would pay us with. But anyway, I had the payroll. So I went around and paid all the guys, because you couldn't call them together. You kept them separated as much as possible. But the guys that were dug in the side of the hill with their tents, I went down them. And when I got near the next to the last tent, and this, I wonder, you gotta always play your hunches. And I was in the tent, I got those guys paid. And I said to them, now you scram out of here and go tell the other guys in the last tent to come on over here. So they came over and I paid them. One guy was missing, and it happened to be Corporal Slater. He'd been on that guard that night, and he was sleeping in the tent. So I sent his sergeant over to get him. So he goes in the tent, wakes him up, brings him outside of the tent, and they're about 8 feet outside the tent when a shell hit directly inside that tent. Spoiled everything. And because the guys were protected with the 3 feet of sandbags, on the outside of the tent, they didn't get any of the shrapnel.
Mm-hmm.
So Slater come over to me and he said, "Captain, you keep the money." And I said, "No, I want to tell you something. This was the luckiest money you will ever have. And please don't ever spend it. Just keep it."
Okay. Let's see, there was the surrender of Boulogne. Do you want to tell us about that?
What?
The surrender of Boulogne? Am I?
Sorry, I don't think he's hearing you.
Okay. You're talking about the colonel wanted a radio, and then you've got the surrender of Boulogne?
Oh. No, I don't know about the surrender of Boulogne. I forgot that. But the radio, see, the supply officer, you know, the table of organization of the Army
Yep.
is that big book they have. And so the colonel on the radio and the supply officer didn't think he could have it. And he asked me, and the reason he thought he shouldn't have it, because the table organization he wasn't allowed. So he said something to me about it. I said, "You go get the colonel's radio. I don't give a damn if you even have to steal it. Get it." So he did get it. The colonel got his radio.
Okay. And you mentioned Monticelli. Monticelli was won by the courage and daring of the infantrymen, the 363rd Infantry. And you were stationed at Sabione. Maybe I'm not pronouncing these right.
Sabione, yeah, that was outside. I'll tell you a little story about my Jeep driver.
Okay.
He was about 18, 19 years old. And I think the reason Sergeant West talked me into using him was because he ever couldn't find him to do any work, but he thought if he was under mine, he would. But anyway, we got along good. His job was, when we moved, my job was to get everybody organized, the kitchen, the latrine, and see that that was done. And they were spread out, and he would find a place for our Jeep. But anyway, this little town where Highway 65 went through, on the outside of it, they went around a hill, and out at about 11 o'clock across the way, about 3/4 of a mile, the Germans had an 88 gun dug into the mountain. And now the 88 gun was probably the best gun of any of the armies in World War II. It was a 3-inch gun, and they used it for their anti-aircraft. They used it on their tanks, and they would shoot at a man with it because they figured that if there was one man there, they would shoot another. Well, they had an area outside this town. They were under observation. So I had a guy on this gun. Whenever a truck would go across this 200 to 250 yard area, he would shoot at him. So after a while, we knew what that area was. So when we got up to that area, we would stop and look out for shell holes and then go as fast as we could over that area. But this morning, for some reason or other, I must have been asleep, but the sun is out bright and early, and we're about 1/4 of a mile across there. When I wake up, and Corporal, my driver, is only about 1/4 way across. And I said get this damn Jeep moving. Just then, about 30 or 40 feet in front of us, a shell landed on the road. And Ed says, look, if we'd been going faster, we'd have caught that one. And I said, and so we got to the other end of the area, and we had a one-way discussion that never again would a shell land in front of us while going over there. But I got even with them a few days later. Now down below here was a house, and Ed and I had taken it over because it was quite near the shelling, but was near the front. But there was Italian houses were built on the side of the hill, and there would be an entryway and a middle room, and then another room, I guess, was a bedroom. But anyway, the Germans did a lot of stuff that seemed to be by clockwork. So one day below this house, about 4 o'clock, they dropped in a shell, one shell. Then they moved up to the road with a whole battery shelling. So this one shell would be give them an idea where they were hitting. And of course the other guns would move their sights with that gun. But anyway, the second day the same thing happened about 4 o'clock. And why I happen to remember that, I don't know. But then another day later, for some reason or other, I was either reading or doing some paperwork in this house where the room to the front was the most open and up. So I happened to look at my watch about 4 o'clock, and I got in my head, maybe their data, the German data, is a little bit better today. They'd been 80 yards below, and then they'd been 40 yards below the house. And so I moved out of that room, and Edge was in the middle room. I said, Edge, come on out of here. Maybe those guys' data is better today with this artillery. But he didn't move. So I got to the entrance room, which came right off the ground. And I got there, and who runs by me but Edge? And he's covered with mortar. He said, you can't believe it. That room you just left ain't there no more.
Wow.
So that was pretty lucky. Just playing hunches, I guess. So I didn't have no troubles.
Now that was towards the end of the war?
What?
That was towards the end of the war? That was towards the end of the war?
No. We were still in the mountains.
Okay.
Now, at the end of the war, see, we had to cross the Po, the rivers. And I can tell you pretty near the end of the war.
And that was with the 5th Army and the 10th Mountain and your division. Plus there's a bunch of divisions that were involved in that.
Yeah, the 10th Mountain was on the other side, and the 92nd, which was Eleanor Roosevelt's division, all colored troops with most of the officers who are white, but it was a colored division. They called it Eleanor's division. But the 10th Mountain was over on our left. Now, at the end of the war, we were combat teams. And I remember we had a regiment of infantry and a battalion of artillery. And the orders was to go up this road and go as fast and as far as you can. Pay no attention to anybody on the right or left, but get through and get through the German army. And if you can get behind them, the war will be over. Well, anyway, in front of us, it seemed like there was a bigger unit retreating of Germans. And they would leave out rear guards every once in a while and would stop us with firefights. But anyway, this one time, they stopped for a little firefight. And of course, the artillery is we're all in line, you know, one behind the other. And I remember talking with the guys, I'm bullshitting with them, you know, right there. I had new lieutenants, some new replacements, and this new lieutenant had been in the Pentagon all during the war, I guess, and they sent him over, second lieutenant.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to have to switch tapes.
Well,
I'm going to have to switch tapes. All right. Go ahead. We're on our second tape now.
you're all ready?
Yes.
See, we're a combat team of the infantry and the artillery. So we're stopped for a little firefight. Evidently, the Germans that are retreating ahead of us were leaving a rear guard every once in a while. So we're stopped there, and I had this new lieutenant, and everybody, and them are the ones you have the worst trouble with, is the people that have just come in. The old soldiers knew to stay right on that road. But anyway, this out right 90 degrees to the road was this windbreak went out probably 100 yards. And out at the end of this windbreak to the right, this lieutenant calls me out, and thinking that he'd heard something back in the Pentagon about living off the land, and there might be a pig or a sheep or something out there, he had his pistol out, and he calls me out. So all I think is there's some animal out there. So I walk right out the hedgerow, a little unconcerned. I get to the end of the hedgerow, and off to my left, probably 25 or 30 yards, is a German gun emplacement, manned by 2 German soldiers, each with a light machine gun, now aimed at me. And the only thing I can think of, there's 2,500 to 3,000 men, like within a quarter of a mile of them, and they really didn't want to start a war. But the only thing I could think of, they still had the guns trained on me. I remember sliding into second base as baseball, and the umpire would stretch out his hands. And that's what I did, and waved my hands. And they laid the guns on the edge of the earthworks. And I waved this lieutenant back to our column, and he went back. And when I got there, I explained to him that if he wanted to go get himself killed, that was his business. But to call me out there, that was a different thing. And for him, he'd stay in line there, or I might shoot him myself. But anyway, I hadn't more than got over that. Then this other new guy, and I never figured this out. He was German descent, and he hands me this German Luger, and he said, "You're captain, here's a gun for you. It's all engraved with gold." And I said, "Where in the devil did you get a gun like that?" And he said, "Over here in the gully." He said there was a German colonel, and he said he wanted to surrender to an officer. And you know, there was two departments of the German army, the old German army, and then the Nazis, you know. And so I said, did you bring them in? He said, no, I shot them. And I felt bad about that. I was all ready to bawl him out for shooting the guy when I realized that they had sent him over from the state to shoot Germans. And that was that. Well, I no more than got over that. And the firefight had stopped. And up above the road, there was a town about 3 miles up. Now, Colonel Lynn, the battery, the artillery commander, said, I think we'll be up to that town. And he said, I want you to go up there and pick out a spot for the battalion to come in. So I went out to the right of this main road, found a dirt road, went up and got to the town. There were some people there, civilians, and they were glad to see us, but I went outside the town, found a good place to pull out the battalion, and then after looking that over, I went back to the road, and who comes by but an infantry scout. He's all alone in a Jeep, and he's coming back. We were on kind of a ridge, and he said, watch it, guys. He said, that valley right there is full of Germans. And he said, watch it. So we went back to the town, and the road that I come in and the main road come together in a Y. So I situated there, stayed there, because I'd been told to stay there till the battalion got there. Well, the town people, they wanted to talk some, but anyway, it started getting later, so I told them to get inside and stay inside, because I had a machine gun on the Jeep, machine gunner, and so I told them to get inside and stay inside, and if there's any fire, and get down in the cellar or something. But anyway, I told them, I said, look, if we see anything move, we may shoot. But anyway, it's pretty dusky. And who comes in to pick us up is this Captain Ben. And he calls me everything in their name. He said, Wiley, what the hell are you doing up here? So he says, follow me. Now, Captain Ben was a guy that always smoked cigars. This I always thought was a funny thing. And actually, most of the time, he was out of cigars, but he had about a third of it in his mouth. But anyway, he said, follow me. So I went back the road, I'd come up, and when I got back there, I said to him, what the hell's the matter with you? What so you excited about? He said, here I was trying to get something to eat. And the colonel says, Wiley's up there waiting for us. He said, somebody's got to go get him. And he said, he looks at me. And he said, I went back and found out how you went. And he said, I got my Jeep and driver and I started up the road. You went. And he said, in front of me is a column. And he said, a column of vehicles. He said, so I told my Jeep driver to pass him. And he said, in the dusk, he said, we got about halfway past the column, and I look up, and everyone's got a German helmet on. And I always wondered, I thought this was probably the funniest thing ever happened. What happened to a cigar? But he said, I told my driver to jump this ditch. And he said, we went around there and got up to you. So that was a column that had stopped our column of infantry, see. But can you imagine, he's passing That was Captain Ben.
Now, do you think they were getting ready to surrender?
I don't know, they were still moving north, see.
Mm.
They were still moving to the Alps. But I think about 3 or 4 days later, we got word that they were surrendering.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you recall where you were when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
No,
No.
no. No,
Now, where were you when the war ended?
gee, I don't know. We were right around North Italy there somewhere. I can't tell what towns. We stayed near an airport for a while, and then at the end, I was up at Gorizia, which is on the Yugoslav border,
Mm-hmm.
and there was just a little creek between us and Yugoslavia.
Now, was there any kind of celebration when you guys got word that the war had ended?
No, everything was quiet as could be.
Mm-hmm.
That's a funny thing. No celebration. Everybody wonders about a flag, and I don't ever remember seeing an American flag in all the combat because you were just telling the Germans where you were.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about occupation duty? Did you have to pull any of that?
No. We were just getting there, and I think they were planning to send us to Japan,
Oh, okay.
see, and that's what happened to me. They had an order that captains down that had so many points could go home, and I had about 100 more points. So I said to my colonel, "It looks like I'll be going home." He said, "No, you won't be going home." He said, "If I go to Japan, you're going to go." But this I never understood either. I was a captain all the time. We went back, and we were at Caserta, Italy, getting ready for a boat to come in to pick us up to go to Japan. I remember I'm sitting on a cot talking to Captain Ben, and the German prisoner goes by, and he says, "The war is over." "How the hell do you know?" He said, "It came in on my radio." That's where we knew it. But the boat had come in to take us to Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and he was 2 days late because he said, "I stayed in New York waiting for milk to come from Wisconsin for you guys." But the next day, we loaded on the boat, and they turned around and brought us home.
Now, you came back in, I think was it 1946 you were discharged?
45, I was home. 45, I was home.
Oh, okay.
Then I was on furlough. Then I had to go back and help deactivate the division.
I see.
I married Ruth. I met Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met Ruth, and 30 days later we got married, and we went back to finish up that was 67 years ago.
Now, you mean to tell me you had only known her for 30 days and then you got married?
Yeah.
We still don't know.
Yeah, we went to the deactivated division, see all the stuff that we took overseas. Somebody had to sign for it,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the battery commanders and so forth had to go back.
And when did they make you a major?
Well, I'm getting out of they're writing up to get out of the Army. And on my page there, he has major. I said, Jesus, don't put me down as major, because in New York State, if I'm a captain, I get $250. If I'm a field officer, I don't get a major. And he said, you've been a major for a long time. I said, I have. He said, yes. And he said, I got the orders right here, but I never got the orders. But the only thing I can figure, that's when my colonel said, see, a major wouldn't get to go home.
I see.
See, so I was probably in for major then and didn't know it. And see, with the paperwork for going overseas would be separated from us. And it was all screwed up. And then, again, I owed him some money because my sister was getting allotments from home, and they paid me $250 for my allotment, and the finance officer down at Camp Rucker, Alabama, he said, here's all the papers where you owe the Army. And he said, here they are, and that must have been the orders. Or Major might have been in with them. I said, is this all the papers that I owe the Army? And he said, yes. So I threw them in a waste paper basket. So I never heard no more about it.
So did they give you back pay for being a major?
What?
Did they give you back pay for being a major?
No, I didn't get nothing.
Okay, so you got discharged February 6, 1946.
Yeah,
So you came back here, back to New York, back home,
right.
and then what happened? Did you go to school?
Well, we
or?
stayed over at the farm.
Yeah.
Well, from Alabama, we came home about Thanksgiving time, I guess. I got home and was around the farm. Then this guy that owned this business in Valley Falls, New York, he and his partner wanted to sell the thing, and came over to the house 2 or 3 times to ask us if we weren't involved, if we would be involved in buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, there were 16 million guys in the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and there weren't going to be too many jobs. And so that's when we bought this business in Valley Falls. It was a feed and coal business, something new.
Yeah.
This is a funny thing. You know, when I got out of the Army, I came to Albany, got a bus up to the end of the bus line, and walked home. And then I stopped at my brother's who owned a farm in the morning and stopped for breakfast. And I said to him, boy, these eggs don't have no taste. And he was quite insulted. Of course, the eggs we had probably were 6 months old, you know. We had all dried eggs anyway.
Uh-huh. Powdered eggs?
Yeah. Should I'll tell you a funny story.
Sure.
Going up Route 65 through the Apennine Mountains. See, there was no motorized stuff. Just infantry and artillery. So, of the 3 divisions, there would be 2 on the line, and the artillery would be and stay in line, but they would change the infantry. But this one time, for some reason or other, with the 91st, the artillery came back, and the next morning, one of my lieutenants said, we must have been 5 or 6 miles behind the front. He said, there's orchards here, and they got peaches here. So I beat it over to the mess sergeant, and I said, suppose I got some peaches. Could you make peach pies? He said, I think I could. He said, I might have to substitute something, but he said, we'll try it. So I said to Nick Marcella, who spoke Italian, I said, take some trading stuff and go get him some peaches. So he came back with about 1.5 bushels of peaches. And the kitchen help went over to start peeling them. And I went over and sat down and took my jackknife and was helping them peel peaches. And it didn't take as long as I thought, because everybody would come by and said, what you guys doing? And I'd say, can't you see we're peeling peaches? Don't you have a knife? So they would help us, you know. So it wasn't long before we had all the peaches peeled, and Sergeant Halls, the mess sergeant, had them all in a square pans ready to put in the ovens.
Mhm.
So probably 20 minutes later he come to me and he said, I can't bake the pies because I got orders that the general is going to inspect the kitchens. See, we were back. So he said, what'll I do? So I thought I might have a few hours or something. So I said, bake the pies. So he started baking the pies. So then probably 20 minutes or 30 minutes later, who comes driving in the yard but the general, my Colonel Lynn, and of course one of the general's staff and his driver. And the general drives up to my kitchen, hops out, walks up to the kitchen, and was met by Sergeant Hall, the mess sergeant, an old army man. And the general says, Sergeant, I've come to inspect your kitchen. And Sergeant Hall says, but I'm baking pies. And General says, baking pies. So he turned to Colonel Lynn, and by that time I had appeared on the scene. And he said to Colonel Lynn, didn't you tell this man I was going to inspect the kitchens? And Colonel Lynn said, yes. There was no argument on that. Then he turned to me and wanted an explanation. And I told him just what happened. Well, he seemed a little bit perturbed. Now, this general was a full-blooded Iroquois Indian, and I don't think he was known for his humor. And I think he was really perturbed. I would say on a number 1 to 10, he was perturbed about a 10. But anyway, he went back to his Jeep, got in. Colonel Lynn got in, and he wasn't smiling either. But then when they drove out, even the driver spun the wheels. But I always think the reason the general was so perturbed, that morning he probably got up, went to get a cup of coffee, and a new man on the job, and the coffee was lukewarm. The dried eggs weren't up to snuff. He couldn't find his kitchen inspection gloves. His staff told him he had to inspect the kitchens. He gets out and there's dust on the star. Then driving after 3 miles to over the 347th Battalion, over roads that Julius Caesar had built and nobody had done anything with them since. He picks up the colonel, goes to check one of his kitchen, and of 300 or 400 kitchens in the 5th Army, I have to pick on this dummy who's baking pies. Well, the next day Colonel Lynn says, you know, you come the nearest to getting court-martialed of anybody I ever knew. And I know the general was after the colonel 3 times, 3 different times, I learned by the grapevine, to relieve me of command. And I always wondered why the general didn't relieve me of command. But if you know, around a general's headquarters, there's generally a reporter, the Stars and Stripes reporter, or the Fifth Army had a reporter. And I can see the front page of the Stars and Stripes. Captain gets relieved of command for giving his men peach pies. Well, I never heard more about the peach pies till Colonel Lynn, he and I had always passed Christmas cards. And he said coming back on the boat, he was in the upper crust. The upper crust of the Army thought that was the funniest thing that happened in the whole Italian campaign was the peach pies that I had for the general to inspect. But it must have been a thing in the colonel's tales, some of the tales he told, because on the Christmas cards, his wife would write on a Merry Christmas to the guy who thought enough of his men to give him peach pies.
Now, after you got home, did you join any veterans organizations at all?
Well, I've been a life member of the VFW and
The Legion?
Legion, yeah. But I had so many things with being in business, new. Then I was in politics. The first thing they wanted me to run for supervisor. Then I was supervisor at the town for 6 years. Then we were running this business. In this business, I was president of the business my brother and I were in. And then we moved over to where we are now with what is what would you call it? A really wholesale center, not, a really hardware center, lumber center. A lumber center we had there, of course, that was a lot of work. Then I got involved in the legislature, county legislature. I was chairman, budget and finance chairman of that. And then I was in Hudson Valley. I was a Hudson Valley trustee. And I guess, according to my wife, I spent a lot of time at home. I spent a lot of times away from home.
Now, did you join, did you attend any reunions at all? Or stay in touch with, well, obviously you did stay in touch with the one fellow.
I went back, Ruth and I went back to see Colonel Lynn down in Florida one time. And I really, with this business and everything, I had to make up for the 5 years I was missing.
Now, how do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Changed my life. Well, oh sure, it changed your life. It's funny. See, the guys from Iraq come back and they have stress. And I got to thinking why I never had stress. But I always wondered this. When I went to district school, they used to call me the laughing fool. When I went to high school, under my picture, they had a bit of mirth. And then in the history they said, wherever there was a bunch of guys having a lot of fun and raising the deuce and laughing, Ab would be there. And then, probably as a year or more ago, 2 years maybe, I met a girl working in the bank who was been a friend. Her grandmother had been a friend. And I said to her, remind me, your grandmother just saw me, and she came back a couple of weeks later and said my grandmother was so happy. She said that I was always the one laughing and having a big time. Now, my wife has never heard me laugh and never seen me cry. And that's kind of a funny thing.
Mm.
How did you figure that out?
I don't know.
That's a mystery.
Hmm.
So it's changing. Well, another thing is money-wise, the values of money. That brings up another story. When I played baseball, there were 6 of us. We had an old car. We had an accident. One guy's son wanted some money because we had bent his fender. And between 6 guys, we had 6 quarters and 1 50-cent piece we give him to fix up his car. But the opposite of that, we get to the Po River, the upper Po, to cross it.
Mm-hmm.
The engineers had been trying to work to build a pontoon bridge. And the Germans there was 3 fighters. They kept strafing them, so they had to quit during the daytime, and they had to wait till night. So we were all waiting to cross for a mile around. Their outfits were waiting to cross. And the Germans had let a lot of equipment there, but they had got their troops across. So each one of my men either had a German horse or a German car they were monkeying with. But there was one big truck there, a covered truck, and the doors were closed. And I remember one of the guys started opening it, and I yelled, "Don't touch it, it may be booby-trapped." So we hooked a rope on it, tied it to my Jeep, and got 100 feet away and opened it up. It was full of money. The same money Uncle Sam was paying us, Italian lira. And I remember the guys had piles of it, piled up 3 feet high, burning it, warming their hands. And there was a few Italian citizens there going crazy. And here's the crazy Americans burning money to warm their hands. So that's the opposite. That I learned, that that money, if you can't use it for something, it ain't worth any more than the Troy record.
Okay.
We better leave it at that.
Now, did you have any questions at all?
No, I didn't know if you asked them about
That's
medals
enough.
or not.
Oh, yes. I understand you received the Bronze Star.
Yeah, that's
And,
just,
and you got some combat stars too.
oh, I got three battle stars.
Battle stars.
Yeah,
Okay.
3 battles.
Now, did you get the combat infantry badge too?
No,
No. Okay.
no.
All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add in closing?
No, except after I got home, my wife and my best partner.
Now, did you have any children or?
Oh yeah. See, yeah, Ruth's done so much for me. We were lucky on that. We got home. See, married, being married. Then we lived in the valley,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was, when daughter was born, and 2 daughters, and Bill, a son, were born. Ruth did most of her parenting. I got to say that, she did that. Because I guess I worked a lot, really a lot. Ruth, why don't you say,
Well, I was gonna say we were neighbors to Jody.
When I was
In
little.
the valley. Her mother.
she's took care of me all these years.
Well, I'm sure she's done a fine job.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't regret it,
No.
any of it.
My wife is my best partner.
And how many children and grandchildren?
We got 7 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
That's with our second daughter.
Let me just put the camera on you for a second.
Oh, don't break it.
Now, during the war, what did you do?
During the war, I worked at Montgomery Ward.
Oh, did you really?
I was there 11 days, 11 years and a day.
Uh-huh.
After I met him, he said, "You quit your job." I said, "I can't quit, I can't, I gotta work." "No, if I can't afford you, I won't marry you."
Now, during the war, what was it like living in, working at Montgomery Ward? Was it a very busy place?
They were mostly all women.
Uh-huh.
All our guys that worked with us when I first went in, they never came back.
Hmm.
They were young.
Yeah. Now, is that the Montgomery Ward over in Menands?
Menands, right.
Okay.
School of Hard Knocks.
Now, what about rationing? Were there a lot of shortages?
Oh, yes, there was a lot of shortage and blackouts.
Mhm.
You ever hear of the blackouts?
Oh, yes.
We went through that. See, I lived right near the arsenal,
Okay.
so they were watching that pretty close.
So you had the blackout curtains at night?
Yeah, no lights showing
Mhm.
anywhere. The whole city was blacked out. It was scary, but
Hmm.
they did it. And they had people out on the hilltops watching for
Oh,
planes. or
airplane
bombs or
spotters.
Whatever happened to come through.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't remember any of that? How old are you?
No, I'm old, but I'm not quite that old. No, I wasn't born till 1948,
Oh,
a few years after the war.
that was the same year my daughter was born.
Oh,
47.
okay.
She was born in, but yeah, they missed it all.
All right, I'm going to switch back to your husband now. I've got some photographs. Can you just hold this one up in front of you? And you're in your dress uniform. And you were a lieutenant in that photo?
I really can't see it.
Okay, if you just turn that around facing me, hold it right there and I can zoom right in on it. Okay. Got it. Okay, now Jody, you've got some more photos.
You want to do him and Ruth too, before and after?
Okay,
And this?
yeah, let's see.
That's you and Ruth.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, yeah, let me zoom in on that.
Does the plastic pick it up? Slip that on
yeah,
plastic.
Yeah, that's all right. There's a little bit of glare from it. And I imagine that was taken shortly after you guys met. And then the photo below, it looks like it was just taken fairly recently. Okay, great, got it. Was there any photos on the back?
Flip it over.
Can you just spin that around?
Turn it around.
Yep. Okay, and there's some more World War II photos of you in uniform. And then there's one of a military vehicle, a half-track, I believe that was called. Yep. Okay, got it.
You got it?
Yep.
Hey, I got another one. I'll see if this one's here.
On the pictures.
I'll see. I want to see if this one's here.
So you don't need this, that you just.
Oh, if that's an extra one.
It is, I just made it yesterday.
Okay, yeah, we do a paper file on everybody,
Okay.
so,
All right.
yeah, I'll add that to it.
There's one taken in Florence, Italy.
Oh, that's nice. I
Oh.
haven't seen that one.
Okay. Very nice.
Handsome.
Okay, got it.
And here's my better half.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, she looks like a movie star.
Yeah, I know it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your interview.
Well, I knew he could talk, but I didn't think he could talk constantly for 2 hours.
Now,
She went over, they got a hold of her.
now you mentioned about the fellow being wounded and them sticking his rifle in the ground
Right.
and then hooking the plasma bottle to it.
Yeah, plasma bottle too. Then he wouldn't go on because the medics had a Jeep with a platform on it,
Uh-huh.
and they would pick him up, see. So, but he'd gone on to another one. So, the wounded. But, see, most of the stuff was from artillery,
Mm-hmm.
snipers.
And you also mentioned about tires being changed.
What?
About the tires being changed?
Yeah, there was a. Yeah, I told you that, didn't I? 155 tires.
You had written it down, but you didn't tell us the story.
Oh, well, no. When probably, see, when we were attacking or something, there would probably be more artillery from the Germans. But during that period, I know there was I think it was the maintenance unit of our battalion changed 155 tires that 8 days
Wow.
from Monday to Monday.
Now, they changed tires because were they just worn
Shrapnel.
out? Oh,
No,
mostly shrapnel.
From shrapnel,
Wow.
yeah. See, a shell could come and hit a truck, but it might not do much damage, but it would blow the tires,
Mm-hmm.
you know, going through.
Okay.
The one little thing, I probably should have had this in the other, but this Sergeant Riley
Mm-hmm.
that was with me with the plane, I remember him one day. I had our trucks used to go down through Florence, then over to Leghorn, to the depot, pick up ammunition for the artillery,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have 4 or 5 ton on the trucks. And coming back through, one of them, the first one, got hilled with a shell and blew his tires, and the driver jumped out and left the truck there. So the guys behind him were all stacked up, although they had been spaced. They got stacked up, so they were all there. And the Germans, they were doing quite a lot of shelling in that area. Right at that spot where the trucks were. So I looked and I thought, when it gets dark, we'll go get them trucks out of there, because the other drivers had got out because they couldn't move on account of the shells were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while,
They smell.
I got a note from headquarters, a call from headquarters to move the trucks. Well, I took a look again, and the shells were coming in pretty heavy. And I thought if headquarters want them trucks moved, they can come right down and move them themselves. So that didn't last very long. Half an hour later, they said to move the trucks, they wanted to get some tanks through. So I'm not thinking, Sergeant Riley happened to be near there, and I said, Sergeant, we got to move them trucks. And he said, Captain, I don't have the guts to send a man in there. And I said, I without thinking, I said that to him. But I said, Sergeant, if I go, you suppose you can find a couple men? He said yes, he thought he could. So he come back with a couple men. They weren't too enthused about it. But I said we'll go over as near as we can, because you know, shelling in an area, there's dispersion, you know, back and forth. So we got as near as we could, and then I picked out what trucks we were going to take. So I said, no, these Germans do everything by clock. We got to check them. So I took my watch out, and for 2 minutes, the shells would be coming in real fast. In 2 minutes, they would be slack. Then 2 more minutes, there would be shells coming in pretty fast. And then they would be slack. So I said to the guys, the next time, after shelling, I'm going to yell, go. We got 2 minutes. We get them trucks. And we got the trucks. And I should have written up for a citation for those guys. But we're so happy to get out of there, we didn't bother with any citations.
Okay. All right, any other stories that you can think of offhand?
Well, I've thought of quite a lot.
What about the time you met Bill?
You met Bill?
But,
The time you met Bill?
well, yeah, a man that used to work for us, for Bill Hagan.
That's a
We were
funny
up in the
story.
Abott, and when my mother wrote and said he was over there, he was in the engineers. So, because, see, combat is times when it's slack and then times when it's tough. But I said to the colonel, I know a guy used to work for us. So I went back to Florence, and I think they were over near the Tower of Pisa. And I went over and picked them up, and we went over to Florence. I asked his captain, and we went over to Florence and spent the day. But that night, to stay, the battalion had a room at the Hotel Excelsior there. So to eat, I said, I won't go in the enlistment club, you come on with me. And so I took off my combat jacket and put it on Bill. He hadn't hardly shaved yet. So anyway, we go into the hotel, and there was all tables with 3 little chairs to each table. And what's that cat? She went by. And all the tables were filled, but one table there was a general sitting at. So I said to the general, you mind if we sit down? And he said no. So I was thinking, the general, he said, I've been in 20 years and I'm only a brigadier general. Here's a guy been in 2 weeks and is a captain. And and Bill didn't dare look up.
So the general was wise to you guys, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you again.